Listen up, gamers. I've had enough. I've had enough of people complaining about stacking in Guild Wars 2 and blaming it on boon radius. But fortunately, that stops today, because we're going to talk about why you stack in Guild Wars 2. We're going to just talk about the stuff in PvE. There's some additional context on why you might stack in World versus World that actually doesn't apply to PvE because of the way target caps works, but we're not getting into that. That's for another time. That is another story entirely. Today, we're going to talk about stacking in PvE. Here's how this works. I think a really common assumption is that you stack in Guild Wars 2 because of boons. And here's where things get really tricky. That is, of course, correct. A big part of stacking in Guild Wars 2 is because you want your teammates, your buddies, to get all of these wonderful boons. Now, where this goes a little bit wrong is that people say, oh, if all boon radius was 600, then nobody would stack anymore. I could roleplay as my barebow ranger and longbow auto from 1500 range. Wrong. Not true. Even if every single class was Herald and could just do absolutely disgustingly imbalanced stuff like this, that wouldn't actually change anything, even a tiny bit. The second reason why you're going to stack is healing. All of your healing abilities are AoEs. So if everyone's stacked together, you can heal up other people, including from the other subgroups. So if you've got two subgroups in a raid group or an open world group stacked together, good news. One healer can heal people all over the place, as opposed to having to ranged heal someone, which, by the way, has a 5 target cap most of the time. You'd be healing one person when you could be healing 5. That's the second reason why you might stack. So even if boon radius was 1 billion, you'd still stack. And then after that, after healing, you've got the downstate. This is another really important thing. If someone goes downstate, if they're in the jungle, if this guy goes downstate, look what I've got to do. I've got to run all the way over here, res this guy, and then we've both got to run back to the stack. That, not good. So even if healing radius was infinite and boon radius was infinite, bad news, you're still going to stack. But wait, there's more. It doesn't end there, guys. It actually doesn't end there. Hang on. Even if you could res people at range, and you had 600 boon radius in every build, and you also had 600 healing radius in every build, by the way, imagine like the Ventari tablet being 600 radius, or like Druid Celestial Avatar being 600, it would look ridiculous. But even if you could do all of that, okay, you still would stack. And that's because of human brain moment. It is way easier to keep track of what everyone's doing if everyone's standing together, right? Like if I'm leading a squad, right, and we're doing some kind of raid boss, or we're doing some kind of event or something like that, it's way easier for people to know where they should be if they can, well, stand on tag, right? This is a classic Guild Wars 2 thing. It's just way easier for us to process as a human being to do that. And it makes it easier for the leader or, just individual players to keep track of where everyone's at. Like, if someone's getting low, it's way easier for me to understand that, oh, they're stacked. I just need to drop a heal and boom, they'll be healed up, rather than, where are they? I've got to move my camera. Where's the guy who's in trouble, right? Who needs the help? That's actually quite difficult to process, especially when you've got a hectic encounter with quite a lot going on. So again, to reiterate, even if boon radius got changed, healing radius got changed, downstate got changed, and also you'd still stack, right? All of that together, you'd still stack just to make it easier to process from a leadership or indeed a gameplay perspective. So where am I going with this? Why am I talking about this? Well, it's because it's one of my pet peeves that people don't understand this. It's one of the biggest pieces of misinformation I see pop up everywhere, especially the subreddit. And I wanted to talk about how could you create encounters where stacking doesn't happen? And I kind of already spoiled it there. It's all about encounter design. If you look at other MMOs, you look at Final Fantasy XIV, you look at World of Warcraft, especially World of Warcraft, you are stacked as often as possible for much the same reason. It's easier to see where everyone is. You've got AoE healing, AoE defensive abilities that you might use, similar to boons, right? That you can use while you're stacked. But hang on a minute, why are people ranged in these games? Very, very simple. Because the encounters are designed in such a way that promotes ranged behavior. For example, a mechanic might target you and you have to move out with it, and maybe you have to stay out with it as well for some period of time. Maybe another mechanic forces you to spread a lot more. Maybe a mechanic only targets ranged players, so you can actually manipulate where, say, an AoE ends up landing by having your ranged players stack together and move around as a unit. It's quite common in some of these games to have all of your ranged players stacked and your melee players stacked, because the melee players might be affected by a certain set of mechanics, and ranged players might be affected by another certain set of mechanics, and so on. It is all about encounter design. It just turns out that, especially in fractals and early raids, there really aren't many mechanics that force you to spread. Like, you end up being stacked constantly. And this is, of course, very true in open world. And to ArenaNet's credit, they have actually started to change this a little bit in more recent open world, especially Secrets of the Obscure, actually, trying to introduce some of these more dynamic movement mechanics into the game. But realistically, the encounter design of Guild Wars 2 has always promoted stacking, right? It's encounters. It's nothing to do really with the game mechanics. Well, like, it kind of is, but that's not how you change this. The only way you can actually prevent players from stacking is to force them to not stack because of the encounter design. Because when you're stacked, you are at your absolute strongest. That is when you are at peak performance. The way that encounters need to operate is they need to be designed to disrupt that by forcing players to spread out, by targeting players with mechanics, by having mechanical, devices that cause players to need to stay at range for even prolonged periods of time, right? That is how you actually create scenarios where being ranged is heavily advantaged. And bear in mind, being ranged is already a really big advantage in Guild Wars 2, especially on certain encounters, but everywhere in general. A good way to think about being ranged is you're immune to any mechanic that is, less wide or smaller than, or has a range lower than how far at range you are, because it can't hit you because you're out of range of it. So being ranged is already really, really good. And you'd have to do some balance changes here, obviously, because range builds are currently doing the same amount of DPS as melee builds. Little bit sus there, to be honest. I think that's something that people complain about, looking at Condi Virtuoso, all that kind of good stuff. But anyway, we're getting off topic here. Here's the deal. Hopefully I have explained why you stack in this game and why a lot of the solutions people propose actually wouldn't change anything at all, and why all of the issues here around stacking, which I do agree can be a little bit silly sometimes. It is a bit over the top in a lot of encounters in terms of the stacking. The way that you solve this is with the design of the encounters rather than actually modifying the game mechanics. It's not necessarily desirable for everything to have infinite radius. I will say that doesn't mean that some of them shouldn't change. A little bit of a bonus topic here. For example, is having a 240 boon radius on Tempest a particularly good idea? No, it's not. Especially seeing as you have like a 4-second channel on overloads. Not good. And is Herald maybe a little over the top? Absolutely. Yes, it is. Yes. But there's probably some happy medium there. And I think it's important to have a mix and match so that some builds work better on different encounters and others work differently on other encounters. And you can compensate by having higher values, more boons, more damage, like more this, more that, more whatever, right? Then we can start arguing about balance. We can do that all day. And, I don't know, CMC and Trig will enjoy watching us squabble over that. But that is once again besides the point. I've distracted myself yet again. We've gotten to the weeds, and now we're getting out of the weeds. We are getting out of the weeds. Encounter design fixes this, or at least will make you stand at range more. Nothing else actually will, because stacking is really good, stacking is high value, and it makes you win. That's it. Boom. Done. It has been explained. And now nobody has any excuse for not understanding this. If you don't understand this, leave a comment, I'll answer it. And when people say this, you, my minions, my viewers, you must go forth and explain to people why boon radius is not the solution here. Why encounter design is the solution. Yes, go forth, proliferate this information, spread it far and wide. But there it is. I've done it. I've finally done it. I slacked on talking about this for too long. And now I have done it. Enjoy. Thanks for watching. Come and watch my stream so you can watch me stall talking about this and rant about it for 5 minutes. That's it. I'm done. I'm out. I'll see you next time.